Why are some bands good? That sounds like a simple question. Perhaps they have better players, perhaps they rehearse more, perhaps they have a fine conductor, good instruments, and a decent hall in which to rehearse. All of that helps, but it's not the whole story. And that is why Frédéric Berr's answer, writing in 1838, matters. Good bands need good systems. That is the forgotten idea at the heart of his book, The Need to Reconstitute the School of Military Music on a New Basis to Improve Regimental Music. The title is not exactly brief. It does not leap from the page. But it tells us exactly what Berr cared about. He was not writing a romantic defence of music. He was not writing a grand philosophy of art. He was writing about structure. Schools, recruitment, training, ranks, pay, discipline, instrumentation, and the practical conditions that make good music possible. In other words, Berr was looking behind the sound. But before we go further, it is worth pausing over what a military band meant in 19th century France. These were not school bands, they were professional or semi-professional wind ensembles attached to army regiments. They played for parades, marches, reviews, ceremonies, public celebrations, and official occasions. They helped soldiers move together, gave dignity to military ritual, and carried music into public spaces where many ordinary people might otherwise hear very little organised instrumental music. In towns and provincial centres, the regimental band could be one of the most visible and audible musical institutions in daily life. So when Frédéric Berr writes about improving military bands, he's not fussing over a minor decorative accessory. He's writing about one of the major public musical systems of his time. He begins his book with a complaint. The organisation of army bands, he says, has long dissatisfied both colonels and musicians. The colonels are unhappy because the bands do not fulfil their expectations. The musicians are unhappy because the system hurts their interests. That's already a bad sign. When both management and labour are miserable, one suspects the problem is not merely a wrong note in the second clarinet part. Berr believed that military music in France had reached a point where minor adjustments were no longer enough. Music had progressed. Orchestras had become richer. New works demanded more colour, more skill, and better balanced ensembles. Yet regimental bands were still trying to function with inadequate structures. His conclusion is blunt. Nothing less than a complete reorganisation was needed. Reorganisation. Not encouragement, not enthusiasm, not a stirring speech from a colonel who once heard a fine march and now considers himself an authority on orchestration. Reorganisation. Berr understood that artistic problems often have institutional causes. A band may sound poor not because the players lack goodwill, but because the system makes good playing unlikely. Who trains the musicians? How many are trained? Do they remain in the regiment? Are they paid enough to stay? Does the conductor have authority? Are the instruments properly balanced? Is there a pathway for advancement? Is there a school feeding the regiments with competent players? These are not glamorous questions, but they are the questions on which musical life depends. In Berr's France, there had already been an attempt to address the problem. In 1836, the Minister of War had created a school of military music. One soldier from each infantry regiment was to spend 2 years studying modern methods and style, then return to the army and spread what he had learned. It was a sensible idea. And Berr gives the school credit. After only 18 months, he says, its teaching method had already produced rapid progress. Some students had become skilled even before their appointed time was complete, and had been sent back to their regiments where their services as players and teachers were appreciated. So Berr is not attacking the school. He is saying it is not enough. One trained musician per regiment cannot transform an entire band. He asks a wonderfully practical question. If the return of a single trained student can improve a military band, what might happen if several soldiers from the same regiment were trained and sent back together? That's the key insight. A single trained person may help. A group of trained people can change the culture. Berr wants each regiment to receive not merely an isolated musician, but a nucleus, a small body of men capable of giving the band unity of execution. A band is not made good merely by having a few capable individuals scattered through the parts. It becomes good when players share standards, style, discipline, rhythm, tuning, and purpose. It becomes good when there is enough trained weight inside the ensemble to pull the whole thing upward. One excellent player can be inspiring. One excellent player surrounded by chaos can also become very tired. Berr understood that improvement has to be embedded. It has to survive beyond one person. And this is why he proposes 3 broad measures. First, rebuild military orchestras on better foundations. Second, fix the position of soldier musicians by giving them ranks and honoraria that reward talent and encourage them to remain in the corps. Third, increase the number of students at the School of Military Music so regiments can do without hired outsiders. We will come back to those hired outsiders, the gagistes, in the next episode. They are one of Berr's great irritations and, I must say, one of the great comic gifts of French military administration. But for now, the larger point is this. Berr sees musical quality as the product of a whole environment. A school, a career path, a stable ensemble, a conductor with authority, a properly organised instrumentation, a reason for good musicians to stay. Take those things away, and the band may still exist on paper, it may still have uniforms, it may still appear at ceremonies, it may still produce something recognisable as sound, but it will not become what it could be. That is a lesson far beyond military music. We often speak about good ensembles as though they appear by magic. A town has a good band, a school has a good orchestra, a church has a fine choir, a community has a strong musical culture. But behind every one of these things is a system. Someone taught the beginners, someone trained the intermediate players, someone created standards, someone organised rehearsals, someone maintained the instruments, someone chose repertoire wisely, someone built continuity from one generation to the next, someone gave people a reason to come back. When those systems work, we barely notice them. We simply hear the result and say, what a good band. But Berr asks us to notice the machinery. Not because machinery is more important than music, but because without the machinery, the music collapses. That may sound unromantic. It is not. There is a romance in systems when they serve human flourishing. A good musical system is not a bureaucratic cage. It's a trellis. It gives the vine somewhere to grow. Berr was trying to build such a trellis for French military music. He wanted bands that could do justice to modern music. He wanted musicians whose talent was recognised. He wanted conductors with real authority. He wanted the School of Military Music to become a source of renewal rather than a modest experiment. And he wanted regimental bands to stop depending on chance. Chance is not a policy. If a band is good only because one gifted conductor happens to be there, the system is fragile. If a school program survives only because one heroic teacher gives up every spare hour, the system is fragile. If a community ensemble depends entirely on 2 volunteers, 1 ancient photocopier, and a cupboard full of music in alphabetical order only by accident, the system is fragile. And when fragile systems break, people often call the decline inevitable. Berr would not. He would say, look at the causes. Were the musicians trained? Were they retained? Were they respected? Was the ensemble properly staffed? Was authority clear? Was there a pipeline? Was there a school? These are the questions of a reformer. And they are also the questions of anyone who cares about musical culture. Because music does not survive on admiration alone. It survives through structures that allow people to learn, gather, improve, lead, and continue. Berr's book may look, at first glance, like a technical memorandum about French regimental music in 1838. And it is that. But beneath the administrative detail is a larger truth. Good bands are not accidents. They are made possible. This has been The Musical Archeologist, Forgotten Ideas from Music's Past. I'm Craig Dabelstein, and today's forgotten idea is this. If we want music to flourish, we must care not only about the sound, but about the systems that make the sound possible.